Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Kovatz. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. Today is our next installment of our virtual training series, and we've got a really important topic that we're going to be covering, and very timely of what we saw last night from President Biden on the PRO Act. So before I turn it over to our presenters, to kind of get into the details on this, a couple of ground rules that I do want to go over with everyone. One, we've got a lot of people that are going to be on the call today and a lot of different experience. So please be respectful of everyone as we're going through the session today. The session itself should take about an hour. So we ask that while you're here, please be present. You can put the phone to the side, answer the email when we finish up. We've got a lot of really great information that we want you to get. So please be present during the session while we're going. And the only way we're going to learn is if we ask questions. So make sure you are asking questions as we're going along, and we will try to get you the answers as we're going through this. So why don't we kick off our session? If everybody, if you want to put in the chat, where you're from, or who you are and where you're from, and what your involvement is, if you're a union member or member of the Democratic Party, just go ahead and put that in the chat, and that way our presenters know who they're talking to. So with that, I know we've got a lot of folks that want to speak today, so I will go ahead and turn it over to our president of the County Chairs Association, Ms. Christina Zahorak.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time today to be with us. I don't know about you, but I'm really excited and proud to be a Democrat, and in particular an Illinois Democrat. For those of you who watched the president speak last night, build America, buy American, right? I just, it's so wonderful to have leadership, not only at the federal level, but also here in the state of Illinois, that understands how important it is to make sure that we are competitive and that we are investing and reinvesting in our people and in our infrastructure. And this is a part of a series that we've been doing here at the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association over the last year or so, these kind of virtual training or information sessions, if you will, to give our membership real tangible information on leading edge, either pieces of legislation or issues that may be in contact in your day-to-day work with the party and or as legislators or just as rank and file Democrats. And this is one of them. And we, as you all know, have a very close relationship with labor and really with any organization that is promoting and supportive of the middle class. And last night, we got a nice shout out on the PRO Act. I believe the president said, send it to his desk. Send it soon, send it now. He's ready to go, as are we. And we've got some folks here today to kind of talk about this issue and why it's so important and why there's an opportunity here that we don't want to miss. And the first, I want to introduce Tim Drea. He's the president of the Illinois AFL-CIO. And I have to have full disclosure, I've known Tim for a while, prior to his rise to this great stature. He served way back when, I'm not even gonna say how far back, because I'm not even sure I know, but he was with my father, I believe, when my dad was serving at the Northeastern Illinois Federation of Labor on the Executive Council, and has always been a touchstone and a good friend. And so we're really excited to have him here tonight in his position as the president of the Illinois AFL-CIO to talk about the PRO Act. With him, we've also got Amy Ruff. She is the resource director at the Illinois AFL-CIO. And joining her is Mandy Jo Gainey. If I say your name wrong, Mary Jo, I'm sure you will correct me. And I had the great opportunity of meeting her probably within her first month when she was first hired by Painters District 30 as an organizer. And she has since risen to the director of organizing for Painter District Council 30. So thank you all for being here this afternoon. Thank you to our audience for being here. And I will automatically turn it over to you great folks to get us started on the PRO Act.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and all the guests for giving us the opportunity to fully explain the Protect Organizing Act during this training. And Christina, you've been around a long time. When people introduce you, he knew my father. He worked with my father, and good stuff. It was those, it was labor leaders like your father, though, that taught me what it means and what it was like when unions were strong and the corporate agenda wasn't driving America, and the middle class drove America. So again, thank you to your father, Ralph, and he'll always be a dear friend, and I hope he's doing well. Dan, thank you for putting all this together. I know you work really, really hard organizing all these things, and it's our pleasure to work with you. So as Christina said, I'm joined this evening by Mandy Jo Gainey, from the organizing director from Painters District Council 30, that takes in from central Illinois to northwest Illinois and the Chicago suburbs, the western suburbs, and Amy Ruff, who a lot of people know as a resource director for the Illinois AFL-CIO. And so Mandy will give us an on-the-ground look at what organizing's like and why we need the PRO Act. And Amy is going to present to us a economic standpoint of why we need to rebuild the middle class. And so the PRO Act is a generational opportunity to reform labor law in this country and to give workers an economic and social justice voice in the workplace and in government. I guess the question is, why is the PRO Act so badly needed? And it's quite simply, our system of labor law and regulations has been too strongly tilted towards the playing field in favor of companies and against unions, and unions are the middle class. And since the National Labor Relations Act was passed 86 years ago, 1935, corporate America has continually challenged and fought the right of workers to collectively bargain over wages, hours, and conditions. According to the according to the Economic Policy Institute, since 1980, rising wage inequality and slow and uneven hourly wage growth for the vast majority of workers have been the defining features of the U.S. labor market. Wage inequality continues to climb, and workers in the middle and the bottom of the wage scale are just making up lost ground and continue to struggle to make ends meet rather than to get ahead. More and more workers are living paycheck to paycheck. The median hourly wage stands at $19.33 and at $19.33 an hour. And so that equates about $40,000 a year for a middle class income. And to put that in perspective, when I came back from the service in 1979, I went to a coal mine not far down the road from me, and I made $40,000 a year. My first year out, working 40 hours a week and a little bit of overtime. And so, it just shows that in 40 years, we haven't really improved that much in wages. Fact is, wages have stagnated while productivity has gone up. And the way they've gotten around it is two people income, double household incomes. And this wage equality is even greater for African Americans, Latinos, and women, which a union contract gives everybody union contracts has no wage equality. If you're a worker, you get the bargain rate. So we do not have anything with wage inequality in a union contract. And that's why union work to improve workers' lives. It comes no surprise that in a Gallup poll last fall, 65% of Americans had a favorable outlook on unions. Of that 65%, 83% were Democrats, 45% were Republicans, and a very, very important number, 64% of independent voters support labor unions. And before the recent Amazon union election, President Biden had this to say about the right to join a union. And Amy, would you play? There you go.
I've long said America wasn't built by Wall Street. It was built by the middle class, and unions built the middle class.
Can you hear
Unions
it?
put power in the hands of workers. They level the playing field. They give you a stronger voice for your health, your safety, higher wages, protections from racial discrimination and sexual harassment. Unions lift up workers, both union and non-union, and especially Black and brown workers. I've made it clear when I was running, that my administration's policy would be to support unions organizing and the right to collectively bargain. I'm keeping that promise. You should all remember, the National Labor Relations Act didn't just say that unions are allowed to exist. It said that we should encourage unions. So let me be really clear. It's not up to me to decide whether anyone should join a union. But let me be even more clear. It's not up to an employer to decide that either. The choice to join a union is up to the workers, full stop. Full stop. Today and over the next few days and weeks, workers in Alabama and all across America are voting on whether to organize a union in their workplace. This is vitally important, a vitally important choice as America grapples with the deadly pandemic, the economic crisis, and the reckoning on race. But it reveals the deep disparities that still exist in our country. And there should be no intimidation, no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda. No supervisors confront employees about their union preferences. You know, every worker should have a free and fair choice to join a union. The law guarantees that choice. And it's your right, not that of an employer. It's your right. No employer can take that right away. So make your voice heard. God bless you all, and may God protect the workers and their families who are trying to figure out how to make it fairly. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Amy. And I guess that, you know, after the president said inspiring words like that, why aren't more Americans joining unions? And the answer is really, really simple, is because the deck is stacked against us. And I'm just going to place a union organizing drive, what it'd be like for you, you know, this Democratic activists that work in public elections constantly, and what it'd be like if you had to run your elections in your jurisdiction like a union organizer has to. So like a union organizer, you go out and collect petition signatures and you have overwhelming support in your jurisdiction. But then, you know, your opponent hires an election avoidance law firm. And then through loopholes through the law, you don't know who your opposition is or who hired you because they don't have to disclose that. And, you know, on the internet for everybody to see or anything. Next thing this union avoidance lawyer or election avoidance firm would do is expand your jurisdiction. So you think you're working in your precinct, but they come in and say, no, the precinct should be bigger. So your electorate expands, kind of like gerrymandering. They put people who don't support you into the unit. And then your strongest supporter who helped you collect those signatures get fired from their job for an unrelated reason. You can file an unfair labor practice or a charge against it, but good luck with that. But you still have your support, and you're going into your organizing drive hard and heavy. But then your entire electorate is forced to watch Fox News in a closed door meeting, and you can't give a rebuttal in the workplace. So your voters have to watch Fox News daily, but you can't get to your voters to say, well, that's wrong, that's wrong. Your opposition can put vote no signs everywhere, but you can't. You can file unfair election practices against unfair election practices are filed against your supporters, and the cases are adjudicated by a judge that's friendly to your opponent, not you. And all of a sudden, your supporters who you started out with become more intimidated and fearful. And then your opposition starts to whisper campaigns that your supporters could lose their job or be denied promotions if they vote for your candidate. They could become even more fearful. In extreme cases, your election day is postponed and rescheduled, so you have to spend more resources and try to keep your supporters motivated, but they get frustrated. After all that, you might win, but then your opposition files more charges and won't sit down to negotiate your victory in good faith. Kind of sounds like Donald Trump, doesn't it? And after a year or more, the support dries up, people are, fired, they leave the job, and your opponent files for a new election and your campaign is busted. That's what happens in a union organizing drive very, very often. So the PRO Act, and why we need the PRO Act, would give the National Labor Relations Board the power to fine companies up to $50,000 per violation. And it would also award punitive compensation for the damages that your supporters experience when they are retaliated against for trying to form a union in the workplace. Currently they just get pay and reinstatement, but that could take 1-2 years and people are long gone. So these punitive damages are very, very important. The bill would also allow more people currently classified as independent contractors to be given the status of employee for the purpose of union organizing, potentially paving the way for gig workers at companies like Lyft, Uber, DoorDash, and others who are highly exploited to organize with unions or even among themselves. The PRO Act would massively adjust what kind of workers can be classified as 1099 independent contractors. So there'd be a strict ABC test put into the law. And, the companies are using this today to avoid paying payroll taxes, to avoid workers' comp, to avoid unemployment insurance, and to avoid minimum wage. And of course, union organizing. And so the PRO Act would also eliminate right to work laws across the country. And these right to work laws are nothing more that states can have the power to declare their state a right to work, or, a union free is what they call it, state. But that just forces us in a race to the bottom. So around Illinois, we have Wisconsin. Scott Walker had Wisconsin go right to work. Iowa's been right to work since 1947. Missouri, they tried to do right to work, but they were overturned by the voters in a very, very resounding defeat for the national right to work folks. Kentucky's right to work, and Indiana is right to work. So we're in an island of states surrounding us, and they advertise very, very much that, we're union free. And, but it's a race to the bottom. So the PRO Act will really make it much, much easier to form a union, a much more fair election process to join a union. Several provisions in the PRO Act level the playing field for union organizers and will hamper an employer's ability to engage in dirty tricks. Under the current law, the NLRB has very, very, very little means in ensuring employers follow the law. It's the Wild West out there, and the employer is the one that has all the bullets. The PRO Act will require employers to reach a first collective bargaining agreement in a timely manner rather than trying to drag the process out to where you lose all your support. It will require an employer and union to begin bargaining within 10 days of a written request, and if no agreement is reached within 90 days, either party can request a federal mediator. And employers would be barred from withdrawing recognition of the union in anticipation of expiration of a union contract. The proposal also narrows the definition of supervisors to allow more workers to be represented by a union, and requires employers to provide all names and contact information of employees with the bargaining unit, and gives unions more power in the union election process. So, you have voter lists that the Democratic Party or the County Chairs Association provide, so you know who your electorate is. Oftentimes in union organized drives, very, very hard to get that information. And then you have to go out and try to get addresses to do house calls and things like that. With this, it would be companies that have to turn it over. And the PRO Act would also block employers from permanently replacing workers who participate in an economic strike, often seen as one of the employer's most effective ways to bust a union would be to say, well, this is your contract, our last, best and final offer. And if you don't like it, hit the street and we'll hire replacement workers, permanent replacement workers, and you'll be out the door. You know, pretty tough to go on strike for better working conditions and wages if you know you could lose your job. You know, and this is not all new. Certainly in the 1920s and early 1930s, winning union elections in the auto and steel industries, rubber, paper, the old industrial unions was nearly impossible. And that changed in 1935 with the Wagner Act, which leveled the playing field. And that's what we need to do again. The union movement needs to organize the big companies, the industrial companies of 1930 today have turned into the Amazon, the Googles, the Walmart, the Target, and places like that. You know, even Starbucks and places in the service industry is where we need to be organizing at. But it's nearly impossible like it was 100 years ago in the industrial sector unions. The PRO Act will once again place unions and employers on a more equal standing and give voice to people on the job and respect. As Paul, the late Senator Paul Wellstone from Minnesota was fond of saying, we all do better when we all do better. You know, the middle class that I grew up in with strong unions, working people had a real shot at good wages, healthcare, retirement security, and a little bit left over that you could take your family on vacation for a week or two. You know, in the Ozarks, for if you're downstate, Wisconsin Dells if you're upstate, not going to Bahamas or Tahiti or anything like that, but just a nice family vacation. And that families are just shut out of those things today. To make life better and for working families and to rebuild the middle class in the United States, it's time to pass the PRO Act. Thank you. And now you're going to hear from Amy Ruff, Resource Director, who will discuss common sense economics and what the PRO Act does and how to lift middle class Americans up. Amy, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I'm going to share my screen with the PowerPoint presentation. There's no sound on it, so you won't have any problem there. Let me get it going here. Changes to the labor laws are like Halley's Comet. They come around every 75 to 80 years. And that's about the same time the National Labor Relations Act and the Fair Labor Standards Acts were passed. Last month, the House passed the Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, sending it to the Senate. House Democrats approved the bill that would provide protections to workers trying to organize, a measure that is the labor movement's single biggest legislative priority in this Congress. The bill passed with a 225 to 206 vote, with 5 Republicans joining Democrats in favor of it. The bill is unlikely to advance in the Senate, given a lack of Republican support for the legislation. Union leaders say that Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, would finally begin a level playing field that they say is unfairly tilted toward big business and management, making union organizing drives and elections unreasonably difficult. Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, told NPR in a recent interview, the PRO Act would protect and empower workers to exercise our freedom to organize a bargain. It's a game changer. If you really want to correct inequality in this country, wages and wealth inequality, opportunity and inequality of power, passing the PRO Act is absolutely essential to doing that. Okay, my slides aren't, there we go. So this is a slide that shows middle-class income shrinking. While the share of income going to the top 10% increased dramatically, we can see from this slide that working people in the middle class saw their share of income shrink as a union membership declined. We can see that as the number of workers protected by unions declined, workers' wages fell. It's not a coincidence. Our labor laws have been surgically weakened over the last 80 years, and it's become harder and harder for people to improve their working conditions. Broken labor laws allowed corporations to attack workers' rights to organize and collectively bargain for better working conditions. And here's a few ways. By firing pro-union workers, holding mandatory meetings to bash unions, refusing to bargain contracts, prohibiting working people from organizing and collective bargaining, and breaking strikes, replacing workers, and avoiding accountability. Support of the union is on the rise. While union density has gone down, the support has gone up. There are only 10.8% of the workers are members of a union in 2020, but unions have steadily been growing in popularity over the last 10 years. A recent survey found that 65% of Americans approve of labor unions. That's the highest mark in 50 years. Another study shows that nearly half of all non-union members in the country say they would vote to join a union if they could. That's more than 60 million Americans. Given that unions are more popular than they've been in the last half century, and we know nearly half of all non-members say they would like to join a union, what does that say about the current state of our labor laws that less than 11% of workers are members of a union? Our outdated labor laws no longer serve as an effective means for working people and to have our voices heard. Struggling workers see union as hope, as a lifeline, and something to pull them up from poverty. We all know the difference between a union job and a non-union job. Working people have fought and won for better wages and benefits. As we can see from this chart, a collective voice means higher wages for everyone, especially those who have been marginalized. In every scenario on this chart, union workers have more protection than non-union workers. The PRO Act is about civil rights. Inequality has skyrocketed because union membership has dwindled and policymakers have failed to pass pro-worker laws, labor laws. Note the difference for women, the 24%, African Americans, 26%, and Latinos at 39%. Union workers are more likely to have health and pension benefits compared to workers who are not in a union. The pandemic has revealed the importance of having health care. Once we put this pandemic behind us, many workers face a bleak future because they don't have retirement security and they'll have to work well past retirement. That's the union difference. America's struggling working families need a break. They need help and they need a union, and we know that. So what's in the PRO Act? Think of how the world of work has changed in the past 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and 40 years. Meantime, the National Labor Relations Act and labor law was written nearly a century ago, when the nature of work and the way we worked were very different. It was drafted by the legendary president of the Amalgamate Clothing Workers Union, Sidney Hillman, nearly a century ago. Labor law has failed to catch up to the 21st century, leaving millions of workers unprotected. The PRO Act is like one of the software updates on your smartphone or your app. The update includes an end to the state right to work laws, or right to work for less, protecting striking workers from getting replaced, giving unions the same free speech rights as everyone else enjoys in the form of a secondary boycott, defining who is an employee, fast-tracked elections, card check, and first-time contract help, giving unions access to company email systems, and finally giving the NLRA some real teeth to crack down on employers who violate the laws. Right to work laws are misleading. We all have the right to work, but this law means right to work for less. It's a relic of the Jim Crow era. Vance Muse, a Texas businessman and white supremacist, was the father of right to work. It spread in the South to keep Black workers down. Muse despised that a union would bring Black and white workers together in solidarity. The PRO Act would amend the NLRA to invalidate state right to work laws. It would allow collective bargaining agreements to require all employees represented by the bargaining unit to contribute fees to a labor organization for the cost of representation, regardless if the state is right to work. For those who don't want to be in a union, it's still voluntary, But since you reap the benefits of the union and all the hard work, you should pay your fair share. The PRO Act expands unfair labor practices, or ULPs, to include prohibitions against replacement of or discrimination against workers who participate in strikes. The frequencies of strikes have been on the decline since PATCO. When President Reagan replaced striking air traffic control workers, employers saw a president take the side in a labor fight and tip the scales in their favor. The employers became emboldened and permanently replaced or threatened to permanently replace workers to break strikes. Denying one's labor through a strike is the worker's strongest weapon against workplace injustice and unfairness. That's our only economic weapon. Employers, meanwhile, have many economic weapons on their side. They can lock out implementation, replacements, and deep pockets to grind us out. For far too long, it's been an uneven playing field in collective bargaining fights, and it's time to even it out. The PRO Act does that. The PRO Act permits a labor organization to encourage participation of union members in strikes initiated by employees represented by a different labor organization, or a secondary strike. And it terminates the right of employers to bring claims against unions who conduct such secondary strikes. This is about the First Amendment free speech rights. We see various groups on either side of the political spectrum exercise secondary pickets and boycotts to further their cause. Pro-life groups, animal rights groups, the NRA, they have more free speech rights than workers fighting their employers. Because of the NLRA's ban on secondary strikes and boycotts, unions have both arms tied behind their backs in a labor dispute. They place a lot of hurdles when it comes to taking the message beyond the employer's factory or shop to target businesses that benefit by the striking workers' labors. When a union engages in a secondary strike or boycott to support a labor dispute, they can face liabilities. The PRO Act will do away with that. The number of contingent workers grow every year. It's fueled by the gigging and temping out of the workforce. It works to the management's advantage. They save billions at the expense of workers. We see it in many of our own union shops as employers bring in temp agencies to staff a workplace. A union member can be working right alongside a temp. They do the same job, they follow the same directions, and they answer to the same boss. The difference is that one is protected by a union contract and the other is not. The union pits worker against worker to undermine worker power. We've seen with our own eyes how the workplace has changed in just the past few decades, but labor law has not kept up with the changes. Exactly who is a worker and employee has changed as independent contractors. Third-party employees and so-called supervisors are the majority of the workplace. The PRO Act expands the definition of employee to finally cover the way more and more people work today. During the Obama administration, the NLRB rolled out fast-track recognition elections. It shortened the window on the amount of time an employer could respond or raise objections to an election. Instead of waiting several months from filing the petition to the hearing and finally hold an election, the process just took a couple of weeks. The PRO Act goes further than the rules we saw during the Obama board. It sets the NLRB pre-election hearings to begin no later than 8 days after getting notice of a petition to unionize. And it sets the post-election hearings to begin not later than 14 days after an objection to an NLRB decision is filed. It requires employers to hand over the list of voters to the labor organizations seeking to represent the bargaining unit in an NLRB-directed election. They can't delay handing over the list of working voters. It prohibits employers from participating in any NLRB representation proceedings. It should be the workers to decide to form a union, not the boss. It puts union busters and union avoidance firms out of business. It makes it unfair labor practice to require or coerce employees to attend employer meetings designed to discourage union membership. And it allows for card check. A union can be recognized as the bargaining representation if a majority of workers petition for it and sign the recognition cards. Once the union is recognized, bargaining over the first contract is the toughest fight. While the union may have won the battle of an election, the employer can ultimately win the war at the bargaining table by grinding out negotiations. Companies often bargain to impasse that will last a year or two or more. The PRO Act will allow federal arbitrators to step in and impose terms on a first contract. In support of what workers are facing, especially those without a union, the PRO Act will allow the NLRB to hire economists. This provision was in the NLRA, but the Taft-Hartley amendments made them illegal. During its brief tenure, it was a powerful tool for unions. PRO Act will allow the NLRB to hire economists who can offer cost-benefit analysis, provide litigation support to the board, and guidance on labor relations issues. It prohibits employers from entering into agreements with employees under which employees waive the right to pursue or to join collective or class action litigation. The PRO Act will do away with mandatory arbitration agreements and only favor employers at the expense of workers. Because the costs and limitations in these arbitration agreements, most injured workers do not have the means or the time to pursue the justice. The PRO Act prohibits an employer's ban on use of company emails by employees for union and organizing activities. Companies usually don't crack down on personal use of email systems, like soliciting coworkers to buy Girl Scout cookies or something like that. But when it comes to workers talking about the union, the company comes down hard. That's not fair. The PRO Act will allow employees to talk about union and organizing on company emails. What usually happens when a company is slapped with an unfair labor practice? They make the worker whole for their losses. They post a notice of violation at the workplace. Is that real punishment for breaking labor law? For the vast majority of employers, it's just a slap on the wrist. It really doesn't deter them from doing it again. The PRO Act will expand the remedies available for workers who prevail in unfair labor practices against employers. There will be more justice for workers. The PRO Act will expand the available remedies for employees such harms to include 2 times the amount of actual damages, such as back pay, consequential damages, and punitive damages. It will establish a civil penalty in addition to any damage awards. Bosses and managers who are rampant abusers of labor law can also face personal liability. There's something for employee side lawyers, a private right of action for violating workers' rights. During an organizing drive, employers will fire supporters of the union to derail the organizing effort. The PRO Act will allow for mandatory injunctions in discharge and other cases. It removes current limits on a court's ability to provide temporary injunctive relief upon petition by the NLRB. The PRO Act would give the NLRB expanded powers to file injunctions to protect workers. Currently, injunctions are only available in extraordinary cases of widespread unlawful conduct. The NLRB rarely files injunctions against employers that violated workers' rights. The PRO Act will expand that ability. To make sure workers know that they have the right to form a union, the PRO Act compels employers to post notices. It will require the NLRB to promulgate rules requiring employers to post notices of employees' labor rights and protections and establishes penalties for failing to comply with such requirement. In Illinois, we're very fortunate to have Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth in the corner with working families. And our encouragement and our next step of action is to encourage everyone to contact them with thanks and appreciation. And that's it for my presentation. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tim.
Well, thank you, Amy. Very, very nice. Very, very good presentation. Very informative. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Mandy Jo Gainey, Organizing Director of the District Council 30 of the International Union Painters and Allied Trades, who will discuss what she experiences every day and the people that organize for District Council 30, what they go through when they're trying to organize a workplace. So, Mandy, when you're ready, please.
Thank you very much, President Drea. I appreciate that. And thank you, Amy, for all that very important information. Just complete disclosure, if we have any kind of technical difficulty, just start and stop the whole camera thing all over again. I feel like that'll probably happen to me next. So I appreciate this opportunity to be here with you all tonight, just to be part of this discussion. You see, the unions solely exist to be a voice for the workers, and that is exactly what I'm here tonight to do. I'm the Director of Organizing for Painters District Council 30. We are headquartered in Aurora, Illinois, and we are proud members of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Our union has been on the forefront of pushing the PRO Act. We have realized that it is vital to our organization, and that's why we made it the #1 priority on our legislative agenda. I would like to begin tonight with sharing a few of our real life situations that are affecting workers right now during this global pandemic. I'm sure you're all aware that during this pandemic that construction workers have been deemed essential. So over the last 13 months, our organizers have witnessed safety concerns like nothing we've ever seen before. We've seen these workers risk their lives, be exploited, be held in human trafficking, and even sexually assaulted. And there is no one currently holding these employers accountable. In one particular campaign, the non-union contractor would not even supply basic PPE for his workers. So our organizers assembled safety toolkits and dispersed these on these job sites. The safety toolkits were made up of a mask, some hand sanitizer, resource materials, mainly just around your rights to safety and working during this pandemic. But we also felt it was important to include a link to your local food pantry because, again, everybody's struggling right now. We took these safety toolkits to the job site and the workers couldn't even take them from us. As a matter of fact, one worker told us that if they were caught talking to a union official that they would be fired. That's really not the worst of it. We all heard Amy just say that 48% of surveyed non-union workers would in fact vote to join a union if given that opportunity. But these particular workers, they won't be given that opportunity because they are listed as independent contractors, 1099 workers. And I just told you how that employer is telling the workers who they can and can't talk to. He's also telling them when to start, when to stop. That is an employee. That is not an independent contractor. And that employee should be taxed as an employee. Now there's another situation that you may have already heard about in the news. Imagine yourself, you're a 19-year-old young man right out of high school. Your very first job is highly skilled, dangerous work, but you're afraid to even mention safety concerns to your closest coworkers for fear you're going to be fired. Now, your mother receives a phone call that her son has just fallen 125 feet from a water tower in a small town in central Illinois, Brimfield. I pray you never have to receive the phone call that Jeff's mother received on May 27th of 2020. Now, the same company, imagine you're a 19-year-old girl this time, and this too is your first job right out of high school. You're excited about the opportunity to be able to learn a skill and a craft that you would be able to financially take care of yourself and your family. One day on the job, your foreman sexually assaults you. What do? Reach out, tell your supervisor? That's exactly what Carissa did. And then they fired her. Now listen, this company, this isn't going on in a right to work state. This company right now is potentially bidding a water tower in a community near you. These situations, they aren't fiction, although Lord knows I wish that they were. These are facts of a campaign that we're involved in. Now imagine yourself as an immigrant worker here in the United States legally on a visa for your contractor. You're working at a car plant in Normal and the global pandemic happens. They shut down all borders and they close down all travel. So you are essentially stuck now in the United States, still working for that same contractor. He's been nice enough to put you up in a Hampton Inn in Bloomington, But the problem is it's you and 4 of your other coworkers per hotel room. Now ask yourself, how can you socially distance yourself from a coworker that you're sleeping next to? It's awful. And there really is absolutely nobody out here to help these people. Passing the PRO Act would help each and every one of these workers in all of their rights. The PRO Act is going to modernize and update the brokenness of the U.S. labor law. But it's more than just a piece of legislation. It's actually a movement. And it's going to take each and every one of us to join this movement to make it happen. We would be each and every one of us know of a community right now that's struggling. As a matter of fact, I'd be hard pressed to come up with a community that is not struggling right now. Friends, I ask you right now to please get off of these webinars. Get out into your community, get out there and talk to your neighbors, to your family, to your friends, and educate them on what you've learned here tonight about the PRO Act. Because it's not just vital to these workers that I've told you about, it's also vital to each one of us. There is something in this PRO Act that is going to help each and every one of these communities. So I have to ask you, will you join the movement? Will you join us in this movement? And if you will, go to passtheproact.org, join us, sign up, and volunteer, and help to recruit other people in your community. And with that, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. We must really participate. We can't just talk. We have got to act, and we must see improvement for masses of people, not just a small group on top. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Mandy. That was very, very inspiring and heartfelt. And I'm glad that you gave us those real life examples, because that's what's happening. And I think you pointed out very, very well that we're in a union state. And that happens in Illinois. I can't imagine what happens in some of these other states where we don't have good elected officials trying to protect us. It's just horrendous what goes on out there. And thank you for those very, very inspiring words. But as we wind down, thank you, Madam Chair Sahoric, Dan. I know Jillian's on somewhere. Thank you for giving us this time to discuss the PRO Act. I know that means a lot to Secretary Treasurer Pat Devaney and I to have this time to explain to other people, not just in unions, what the PRO Act means for all of us. As John Kennedy used to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we get better in and wages rising, everybody's wages will rise. There's no doubt unions are the backbone of this country and a strong middle class. And we are ready to roll up our sleeves with President Biden to build back better. Thank you again. And we look forward, we're working with the Illinois Democratic County Chair Association, and we're open to any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you, Christina.
You're very welcome. And I just, again, just to kind of reiterate, I see we might have a couple questions coming in, but the action that we're asking folks to take is, first of all, we are fortunate to make sure that you go and thank Senator Dick Durbin as well as Senator Tammy Duckworth for their support for this, as well as making sure that you can familiarize yourself with those talking points in support of the PRO Act. So we'll be sure to send around to those who signed up for this information, kind of a white paper, if you will, about the highlights of the PRO Act that you may want to know or to be able to pass on. And then we'll make sure that we get this training up and out to the rest of our county chairs and invite them to invite their membership to take time to view it as well. We have a question from Amaja. Are there any particular Republican senators that might be supportive, considering they were so helpful on the American Rescue Plan? I just say that with some some tongue in cheek.
Well, I do know that that's a very, very good question. And unfortunately, you know, Mitch McConnell, and he's the senator of no. And I love some of these memes. You know, we all know what Republicans are against, but we don't know what they're for, because they're not for anything that moves America forward. Actually, there are 48 Democratic senators who have signed on as co-sponsors in the Senate. The two senators from Arizona, Mark Kelly and Sienna, is that how you pronounce her name? She is not yet, and we're hoping to get them. I would think maybe Caputo from West Virginia could be maybe gotten, Murkowski, maybe Susan Collins, maybe, but it's that's still 7 away from 60 in order to move it. And you know, the filibuster is something that I think holding America back on a lot of fronts. And if we could figure that out, I think over the summer we want to keep mobilizing and organizing and doing everything that you need to do. And hopefully around after the August recess, they'll come back and hopefully do something in order to reform labor law in this country.
Thank you for that response. So anyone on this call who's got family or friends in those states, you know what to do, right? One other question that came in, if you have, I know we're getting close to time here, but the question was, I think under the PRO Act, is it that the NLRB lawyers will advise and represent organizing workers?
Well, you know, the thing about it, if you ever went back and read the preamble to the National Labor Relations Act, you would think, what's the problem? This thing is like, that's what the NLRA is supposed to do. The NLRB, excuse me, is supposed to represent workers and help workers join a union. But through these union avoidance firms, loopholes in the law and things like that, they really corrupt elections. And kind of why I went through, what if we had to run public elections like Mandy has to run an organizing election? We'd never elect any Democrats. You know, you sign a petition for J.B. Pritzker and you lose your job the next day, boom. Which is why card check's very important, because, you know, there's no retaliation. If you get 50% plus one of the cards in the workplace, you're in. And, you know, there's no retaliation. So, you know, the National Labor Relations Board is there to protect workers, much like the EPA is there to protect our environment or any other regulatory agency. They're there to serve the people, not the corporations.
And they should start.
Yeah, and they should do their job. Do your job. Exactly.
Right. Anyway, so I know we're getting kind of close to the end here. I just kind of wanted to see if there was anything else that either you or I did see your Secretary Treasurer Pat was on the line. If you wanted to say hello or a few things, you're more than welcome to, Pat. It's always nice to see you too. Or not. But anyway, I just want to make sure to just give a shout out to him as well. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for being on this training. This is, again, I think, you know, Democrats are often called to solve problems and to fix things, right? You know, the Republicans get in, they create this chaos and this mess, in my opinion, and studies also have shown that to be true. Democrats come in and fix stuff. And that's what this is. It is fixing a problem that has been there for quite some time, for generations, quite frankly. And we have the opportunity to do what's right and to make sure that everyday Americans, the middle class, has the opportunity to do what they want to do fairly, which is join a union if they want. And that's all that this does, as far as I can see. So thank you again for being here. And we are here to help you in any way we can, and look forward to making sure that this gets passed. And President Biden, as he said last night, gets it on his desk so he can sign it. We have an opportunity, let's do it. So again, thank you everybody. We will see you soon at the brunch in person on August, is it the 18th or the 6th? I forget, I should know.
18th.
18th. We will see you there all in person and hopefully celebrating maybe the PRO Act by then, who knows? And maybe, I'm sure, a lot of other things that not only is happening here in Illinois, but also at the federal level. So see you soon and be safe and get vaccinated.
Thank you.